So the first video today, I'm gonna do a hand tattoo on one of my good mates, Cameron, and I'm gonna run you through the whole design process, the whole tattoo process and everything. So this could be quite a long video. Obviously you guys are here for the information and the teaching. So I'll be voicing over all of the whole tattoo session. Pretty much just what's going on in my mind while I'm tattooing, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, how I'm doing it, what my machine's running at, volts wise, what cartridge I'm using, what color inks I'm using, what I'm dipping into, all of that kind of good stuff. So it gives you a real insight into what I'm actually doing, rather than just seeing me do it, and I'll explain everything. So I really hope that helps you guys, and lots of videos like this to come, and I think that's about it. So enjoy this first video, and let me know what you guys want more of. Let me know what you guys want to know. If you guys have any questions about anything tattoo related, basically just let me know, and we will I'll try and answer it on the Patreon. Side note, big thank you to Matt Sotello and Andy Torres for being the first 2 Patreons before I even released any content. So you guys are legends, and thank you so much. Let's get into it. So this is the start of the design process. I went through a whole bunch of different fox faces just to try and find the right one. I tried front on and it wasn't really working for me. So I settled with one that was more on the side. It filled out more of his hand. Used some leaves to sort of fill the rest of the gaps. A couple of bits down onto the fingers, without taking too much of his knuckle space up, because I think he wants to get some like black lettering stuff over the knuckles eventually. So pretty simple design, this one. I changed the flow of the tongue just to fill a bit more of the space that was there in between the mouth, and just putting in all the stencil lines over the top. I'll do some videos on designing and composing the designs properly in coming days, weeks, months, whenever it may be. So design on this one's pretty simple. Getting a rough outline and then just blocking in the color, because when I use the color from the reference, it's I get lost sometimes. So if I simplify it right down and re-put in where the blacks are meant to be, then I can really get an idea of how I'm gonna tattoo it. So as you can see, he's got a bit of a busted knuckle, which obviously isn't ideal for a hand tattoo, but we went on with it nonetheless. I just went around it, and he basically he'll come back for a touch up. It's only just on the very edge of the lip of the fox anyway, so it's not too bad. So I've set up a trolley cam so you guys can see what I'm doing when I'm off camera, not tattooing. So you can see what inks I'm dipping into, what needle cartridges I'm using, how much cream I'm using, all that kind of stuff. I feel like I put way too much stencil stuff on this, but it seemed to be alright. Sometimes you can use heaps of it, as long as it dries a little bit before you put your stencil on. Obviously let it go tacky and don't put it on when it's soaking wet, otherwise it'll just drench your stencil. That's why I like to dab some of it off sometimes and then just really rub it in so that the stencil sticks really well. You can see me waving it to try and dry it off. So for stencil placement, this was kind of hard because his sleeve cuts off at a very distinct line. So I had to actually use one of the leaves from his sleeve as the ear. You may or may not be able to see it in the video, but the very tip of the ear actually goes up into his existing tattoos, and I'm going to work that ear into B so that into the other tattoos so that it flows better, because it was a very abrupt line. Just making sure everything around the top of the hand is stuck properly. And around his knuckles as well. Just give it a good firm press. Just playing with it a bit. I'm going to take some scissors. I'm going to cut the bits just in between his fingers. Obviously careful not to cut your client's webbing of the fingers, because that would suck and they probably never come back again. So just using the cuts to then round the stencil around the edge of the fingers, just so that it can take the form of the fingers. And moving part of the stencil, part of the back leaf that's on his pinky finger, just to move over so that it goes actually onto his finger, because I think it was just in between his two fingers. Peeling the stencil off gently just to make sure that everything's stuck down and everything's on there good enough. We got the stencil in one, which is always a bonus. And that saw on his knuckle ended up just being on the lip, the bottom lip of the fox. So the way that the stencil was sitting, I was just having a look at how it was sitting when his hand was clenched, and I didn't like how far the jaw actually went over down onto his knuckles. It actually, when he bent his hand, it looked quite strange. So I actually ended up making the jaw a bit thinner. You can see that I've drawn the line in on the fox's bottom jaw just to thin it up and keep it up onto the hand and not going down over to the knuckles. So I'm just organising my cartridges. I have my cartridges go from smallest to largest generally, and what I've actually got them sitting in is just the largest ink cap that I have, with a little bit of the Dettol and soapy water. Just cleans the needles out, and if you've ever got ink sitting in them, it doesn't dry out. Props to Monique Allen for showing me that one. She came up with it, and I think it's an absolute amazing idea. So just asking him if he's ready to go, as we all do. And didn't want to start right on his knuckles for this one, so I started around the mouth, just above his knuckles. Just didn't want to start on his fingers or right on the knuckle bones. Starting with a 9 liner. I believe for this tattoo, what I've got out at the moment is a 3 liner, a 9 liner, a 7 trad liner for the very outlines, and a 5 liner, and I'm pretty sure I don't use a 5 liner, but we'll see going along into it. So at this point, just dipping into black and just doing the outlines pretty standard, taking it nice and slow, and not really wiping away, just because the stencil's so fresh and I don't want to lose it so early into the tattoo. So just dabbing the ink rather than wiping it away. I just start going rogue here, just not paying attention to the stencil at all. Obviously decided that it needed another whisker in a bit of an open space there, a bit of a gap. So filled it up with a whisker that wasn't stenciled. Obviously, if you guys feel like your design has lacked something, you won't always get the perfect design before you put it on. Sometimes you decide to change things up. So the tattoo machine I'm using here is an FK Irons EXO with the 4mm stroke, and with the 9 liner on the hand, I'm running at about 8.5 volts. You can go 8.5. You can sort of range from anywhere from 8 to 9. So flashing red on the machine is 8.5 volts. I actually have black film over the light that flashes, so it changes the color sometimes. When I'm tattooing, I can tell what it's on, but don't go off the color of it in the video because it could be sort of wrong. So just working all of the lines in. The very outer lines, I think instead of using the 7 trad liner, for some of the outsides I used a double 9. So I just use a 9 line and I pull the line, and then I go back just next to it just to bolden it up, just because it's the bold outlines. Obviously with neo trad, with my style, what I do is I do all of the outest lines, if that's even a word, the most outer lines, I should say, are the thickest. Then anything that is a feature of the subject that you're tattooing, I generally do in a thicker line, but not as thick as the outline. Then coming down into small detail lines, they're generally a 3 or a single needle, because I believe that in neo trad, one of the biggest things is having a large contrast in lines, in line weights, and it really brings a different dynamicness to the tattoos. So you can see I've got the bamboo goo on my right glove, the one that I tattoo. I always either use my right pinky to put cream on, or I use my left pinky from my right glove to apply it. Always just super minimal amount, just to pull that ink a little bit. Just helps keep the ink where it is, rather than it going all over the skin and making a mess. Starting to wipe the stencil now. The stencil's definitely stuck there. His skin took it really well, so it wasn't moving, which means that instead of just dabbing it away, I know the stencil's dry, I can start really wiping it away. I try to keep things clean, but on hands it's really hard because the pores are very thick and deep, and the creases in between the skin cells are a lot deeper and hold the ink easier, which means that you can't wipe it out as easy. Cameron, my client here, also works at a tire place, so he's hands-on work all the time. That's why he's got a bashed up knuckle. So that makes the hands harder when you work with them, you use them every day. Going right down onto the fingers, just keeping it slow and steady, keeping a slight angle on my machine. I tend to outline quite vertically. A lot of people will say to bring your machine down onto a 45-degree angle. Of course it works, everyone tattoos differently, but I like to keep it more vertical. I do put a slight lean on the machine though. Just getting him to clench his fist so that we can get into those knuckles. Real good fun. He loved this. You can see it's getting quite messy in the black, So I'll probably bring the foam out soon and just give it a really good clean up so I can see what I'm doing. But with black, obviously you're not going to mix the black ink into anything because there's nothing else to mix it into, so it's fine to be a little bit messy as long as you can see what you're doing. If you guys have any questions about lining, doing the outlines, just let me know. Just send me a message on Patreon, or throw it in the comments so that we can talk about it, with everyone. At some point I will set up like a Discord or something that we can all sort of, have a community chat about that kind of thing in. But just for now, send me a message, or throw it in a comment and we'll have a chat about it. I guess there's probably only so much voiceover I can do for an outline. Obviously, the tattoo is in real time, so I think the outline of this took about half an hour to 45 minutes. So I might let you guys enjoy some of the outlining, and I'll just sort of speak on key moments. When I'm outlining, I do like a little, I don't know what it is, like a little check at the very start of my line where I just touch the needles onto the skin just to sort of see where they're going to land, just to check that they're in the correct spot. And I sort of do this like little sort of double tap just before I take my line. I think it's just a habit thing, but now that I've mentioned it out, you might notice it more. But I think I do it just to make sure that the line is exactly where it's meant to go, and the needles are hitting in the right spot, and I guess haven't moved. Not that that's very common. Make sure you make your client move to how you need them to be so that you can comfortably tattoo them. Something like this going up onto the side of their hand, it's obviously not uncomfortable for them, but it really does make a difference for you. Obviously don't try and tattoo upside down. Sometimes we do because we sort of just get into the flow of things, and just keep going, but always make sure that you're comfortable and make your client work to you. So just finishing some of the bigger outlines with the 9-liner there, and changing out to a 3-liner to do some smaller stuff, do some smaller detail lines, and out with the Hustle Helper foaming comfort enhancer, I think it's called. I'll link that in the description for you guys so that you know what I'm using there. But that foam just cleans it right up so that you can see what's going on. It's quite hard to clean the ink out of hands regardless of whether you're using the foam or not, but this cleans it right up. So showing me something on his phone, I'm not sure what that was. So I've changed over to a 3-round liner now. Still dipping in black, volts are the same. If anything, with your fine small liners, you can go down in volts. You can stay up in the high volts as long as you're being careful with it. Don't know if careful is the right word, but just making sure that you're not drilling it too deep, because the thin liners really do blow out a lot easier. A common problem with this camera that I'm using is it only has half an hour of film time at once. So every now and again in this video, it's just going to skip forwards. I think I missed some of the black shading, but you guys will always get that back on another video. Just finishing off some of the thicker outlines around the front of the face, and then we'll be changing back to the 3 again. To do some more detail lines, dipping in the black, taking some cream, rub it on the area that you're about to tattoo, do your check of where the line is. Just doing a little circle on the end of those whiskers just so that it's not a plain line. Personal preference, style, definitely a style preference thing. I believe I'm now done with most of the lines in the Fox. Not that I can really see what's going on, so we'll give it another Hustle Helper foam wash up. Get rid of all that ink. Hustle Helper will take your stencil off if it's like early stencil, but if the stencil's quite set, then it's usually pretty good. But it'll definitely dull down your stencil a bit. So just be careful if your stencil's not stuck completely properly. Like, I probably wouldn't use the foam in the first sort of 15 minutes or 20 minutes of tattooing, just to make sure that your stencil's definitely stuck there. Can also put some towel on and give it a bit of squirt with soapy water just to really like soak the pores in. Once again, be careful of your stencil. Clipping back in that 9 round liner, I believe, to get that first knuckle. When you're working on fingers, you've really got to drill it in. Obviously don't go too crazy because they do blow out, but you need to get it to the point where it's like nearly blown out, so that it'll stay, because if they're just, anything less than that, it's just going to look like they're scratched in and it won't heal nicely. I really apologize if you can hear the dog barking in the background. It's actually my neighbor's dog, and it barks at itself while it rubs its back into the grass, and it's really annoying because it does it all the time. But anyway, hopefully it's not too annoying if you can hear it in the background. So just getting the lines around the face of the fox done and the other leaves. Don't ask me why I start in the middle of a line sometimes. If you can help it, probably don't do this, because you're better off starting at the end of a line, pull the whole line, or pulling the line to a point where you can then sort of fade the line out, and then you can pull from the other end and fade it back into where your last line finished off. That's a skill that takes a lot of practice to get it neatly, to make it look like it's not 2 lines. So you want to take as little takes over 1 line as possible. I think it's obviously a feel thing, and I say it a lot, but tattooing is something where you really need to be able to feel it out, and you need to feel the resistance on the needles. You need to be able to feel, what the machine's doing, what the skin feels like. Once you sort of get a hang of all of that, then you can really sort of start to understand what your needles are doing, sort of just by feel, just not even by looking at them. Getting him to turn his hand onto the side. I think this was the bit that he said sucked the most. There is a lot of nerves on the end of your hand there. I did intentionally miss the stencil there, so I was just bringing it up onto his hand a little bit more. I felt like where that line was right down on his hand, with him being a tire fitter, was probably going to be one of the lines that would just fall out. So it felt a little bit, useless to get put that line so far down onto the side of his hand. Bit of an awkward position for him, but definitely need it to be face up so that we can get a nice lean on his hand. I always feel like I need to lean my tattooing hand, so my right hand, I need to be able to rest the palm but like the base of my hand on something so that my hand is more stable while I'm pulling the lines. Another little bit of a clean down, just because those purple stencils, the stencil lines in the ear, are pretty full on at the moment. Just cleaning it up so that it's a little bit easier to see, and swapping back over to the 3 liner and just putting the 9 liner into the water along with the 7 trad liner that I haven't used yet. I did fill it up with ink at the very start, but I decided not to use it. It was a little bit too thick to just go in with. I wanted to use the double 9 liner. So finishing off the rest of that smoke. Set your pace and just work it. Just work at a steady pace. I get told that I work quite quick. I don't think I actually go too fast, but I just more work at quite a steady pace that I'm comfortable at. And when you're in the flow of it, it just gets done quicker rather than hesitating. Just finishing up those tiny little ear lines, the little hair lines, which are quite tedious, and changing back over to the 9 liner again. I've seen some lines on the outside of his hand that need to be touched up. And maybe a couple that I actually didn't do that line yet. Bit of an awkward spot, just trying to sort of figure out how I'm going to get him to sit. Grabbing some paper towel and rolling it up so that I can actually sit it underneath his hand. This is a technique that you can use. You can pretty much use anything. If you use a pillow or anything like that, just make sure that it's like glad wrapped up. Make sure that it's something either disposable or that you can wrap up and clean later. So you can see the ear is actually inside that leaf. And what I'm going to do is use the lines of the leaf to replicate the hairs of the ear, and then the very top of the leaf I'm actually just going to black that out because it is solid black around that. That will make it not look like a leaf anymore, but show the ear through where it's open skin at the top of the ear. So that was how I was able to work it into his sleeve, even though the sleeve has a solid line cut off. He did say that the guy who did his lower arm was going to work off it somehow, but yeah, I don't know if he's tattooing anymore. Changing my needle back out to the 3-liner again. Couple of little lines on the face that I want as reference lines. Because they're reference lines, I'm not taking them as solid, just sort of a not a scratched in line, but a kind of a quick line, just as a reference, so that I can see later where the colour needs to start and finish. Taking the needles out now and giving it a good clean up again. I believe that the outline's done now, and we're going to move on to some black shading. Yeah, so as I thought, I did lose quite a lot of the black shading footage on this due to the camera turning off after half an hour. That is a real pain in the ass, but it is what it is. I'll do some more on black shading in another video for you guys. Maybe we just focus on like the the outline and the color for this one. So for the black shading, for the tighter areas, I'm using an 11 mag. I personally like to use quite big mags, pretty much the biggest mag that I can fit in that area without sort of squeezing it in. I like to do that because it means you're covering a larger area, less needle marks. You're going to sort of see less of the edge of the mag, and I think it looks smoother. So now I'm turning my voltage down to 6.5 volts and using a 15 curve mag to blend color. I'm starting with the dynamic black and dipping just once into that, and then filling it with Mississippi mud, which will darken off the mud color, the deep red, so that it's close to the black but not quite. And I'm just going to work in circles and overlap the black that I've already put in there just a little bit, just so that it blends in nice and smooth. When I dip back into the Mississippi mud again, I'm also going to take some tangerine. I'm not washing my needles out on purpose so that you get a smoother transition through the colours. You'll see at the end of this leaf I do wash my needles out, and I dip straight into the tangerine because I want the end of the leaf to really pop and be really vibrant. So dipping into the next lightest colour without washing your needles out will give you like a smooth effect through the different stages of the color, going from dark to light. That's probably the best way to get a solid blend, and without having sort of juts of color, or like where you wash it out and then you got like bands of the colors that you've changed through. So not washing your needles out is probably the best way to get that effect. So you can see that I just washed my needles out then, because I've dipped just into the tangerine, because I'm going to blend it back. That's what I'm doing there, just blending it back a little bit into the red. So it's still going to blend nicely and heal pretty smooth, but I just want the end of that, the tip of that leaf to just be really bright. For all of these leaves, I just repeat exactly the same process. Start with the black and dark red mixture without washing my needles, dip into the next color, which is the tangerine, tattoo that in, dip into the tangerine again and again and again, and it just gets lighter and lighter and lighter. And then for the end of it, wash the needles out, slap some tangerine in, and sort of blend it back towards the other stuff just to make the tip bright. Just literally the same for every single leaf. Make sure when you're doing knuckles, packing solid colour, because there's not as much skin and like flesh behind the actual skin layers. Number one, you can tear it up, like tear the skin up quite quickly and cause a lot of trauma to the skin. And number two, if you're working too quickly, especially in that kind of spot, you're not really putting ink in or anything. It's sort of just like traumatizing the skin, and most of the time no ink will be going in. So you've got to work really slowly in these areas and make sure that you stretch the knuckles out just a little bit. What I'm doing is I'm just like grabbing his finger and just pulling the skin to the side or pulling it away from where I'm tattooing, just to tension the skin a little bit. It's not a lot and it's kind of subtle, but it really helps with getting the ink in when you're putting color in on the knuckles. It's really hard to get color to stay solid in the knuckles. I'm lucky that what I'm using here is like a deep color. I haven't seen this tattoo healed yet, but I might get him to send me through some photos so I can put it up on the Patreon for you guys so you can see how it healed, so you can see the comparison. But yeah, just work slowly on the knuckles and just take your time. Make sure you keep cleaning the knuckles and cleaning the skin, and just really make sure that the ink looks like it's in beyond just like the top layer of skin, because it can be quite deceiving around the thin skin like areas like the fingers and knuckles. Other than that, no difference in the way of color blending, just doing the same thing as the other leaves, just doing tighter circles and working slower, and that's pretty much it. So all the leaves are done now. Just got a Trad 7 round liner. These are by they're by Rose Needles by Just Tat, I believe it's called. I'm pretty sure these are just available in Australia. They're from Just Tat, but they probably do worldwide shipping. I'm not sure. You'd have to suss that out. So I was just touching up a few things that I'd missed, and I'm just going back to my curve mag, up on 8 volts in the black, and I'm just putting some black from the outside of everything. You can see around the front of the face, around the front of where that leaf is, that I've just wisped a little bit of black out from the circle that's around the fox's face. That's because there's going to be a light color in there, and I'm pretty sure I do it orange or yellow. So that color against skin color isn't going to stand out as much as that light color is against black. So creating contrasts in tattoos in general, but in Neo Trad, makes your tattoo like so much more dynamic and makes it look next level when you work in the contrasts, right? Giving it a good clean up with some Hustle Helper foam. That foam should be just about accessible pretty much wherever you are in the world, in your local tattoo supplier, or the tattoo supplier that you use. It's by Richie Bulldog, same as Hustle Butter and all of that. It's basically just that stuff with a bit of lidocaine in a foam, and it cleans unbelievably, reduces redness. It's really good stuff, and also numbs. So I'm going back in with an 18 round shader. I've lowered my volts just a little bit because I am going to be packing some colour. I believe I was just touching up some of the black that I missed earlier. Yeah, just doing a couple of little touch-up bits. Going in with some grey on the nose, working back into the black that's already there. 7 volts, standard colour packing volts. And then just working some in around the nose as well, using the 18 round shader, but almost using it as if it was a mag. You can get just swinging back and forth on it. Sometimes you get dot marks, but if you work it over the area quite a bit, you can get quite a smooth blend with some big round shaders. So then I'm dipping from the khaki grey into the warm mink. That's like I guess it's like a really, like sort of like a medium to dark skin tone. That's number one, it's warming the grey, making it have a warm feel, so it's adding red, but it's also creating the darker version of the grey that I'm going to use. So the khaki grey by itself is sort of the standard grey. It's almost the light version of the grey, and then anywhere else that's darker grey is khaki grey and warm mink as well, sort of blended together depending on how dark I want it to be. If there's any questions that you guys have about this tattoo or about anything else, just drop a comment and I can answer it for you. We can have a discussion about it. If there's anything that you guys are struggling with or need help with or anything like that, just let me know. You can either send me a message or you can drop a comment. I really prefer the 18 round shader over something like a 5 or a 7 mag. I feel like the 5.7 mags, even 9 mags sometimes, do a bit more damage. I'm not sure. I prefer the round shader. It feels like it gets it more solid. It's more direct and sort of where it needs to go. So picking up the 3-liner with some black. Adding in some hairs around the neck of the fox. I realised that there wasn't a fine, like a determined line on where the neck finished. So I just added that in, just a little improvising. And then going into some 2H monochrome grey with the 18 round shader, so that's the lightest version of the grey. So that's like my 3 tones for the grey. With colour blending to keep it simple but make it look effective. You basically pick your medium tone. So for this, it's khaki grey. Then you've got warm mink is the darker version of it, or mixing them. And then you've got a lighter grey like a monochrome 2H or any kind of light grey, misty grey or misty clouds or whatever it's called by Starbright. I use a lot of Starbright, world famous. Eternal I don't use heaps of, but I do use a lot of Starbright. So Starbright, if you want to hit me up. So back in with the smaller mag now to just get in some of the smaller areas around the face. I guess for the hand, an 11 mag isn't that small, but I'm starting with all of the dark browns. So all of the dark brown areas I've made in warm mink. And then I blend out the brighter browns or oranges, I guess. It's browny orange for the fox. I blend those out from the dark areas. I just make sure that I get those dark areas nice and solid. Obviously with Neotrad, even if you're using like a reference, like I use the reference for the fox, don't try and get every tiny little bit of dark detail and stuff in there, because you're going to be heading towards realistic. The more detail you put in, the more realistic it's going to look. The more you block it out, the more traditional side it is. So if you block it out enough but put interesting shapes in the blocks, then it really gives that Neotrad effect. So I've blocked out all of my dark, and I've dipped back into the yellow ochre, and now I'm using that to put in my medium tones. Working in circles, making sure that I overlap the dark colour and blend it out from that. Obviously if you don't, you're going to have a line in between it that sort of heals, and there's not ink that's like solidly packed in there, and there's a bit of a skin gap in between your colour blends. That's a big thing that will make your tattoos look like they're like lacking in understanding of colour blending. So now we're dipping just into the yellow ochre. That same technique of dipping into the next colour without washing the needles out, just to get that smooth blend. now dipping into some white. So we've gone from the warm mink into the yellow ochre, now the yellow ochre into bright white. It brightens it right up and makes it sort of like a really light mustard colour, which will become the lightest part of the fox's browns. Going back into the dark again, get some dark spots in the front of the face there and at the bridge of the nose. It's about a medium colour at that point, I think. I haven't washed my needles out yet because I don't want to get harsh colour changes, so I'm just dipping between them. You can dip between dark and light going either way, so you don't have to work from dark to light. You can dip from your light colours back into your dark colours, and it's just going to do exactly the same process of blending either lighter or darker, but it's still going to be a slow process. So what you can see here is me working that ear into the leaf at the top. So packing the colour into obviously the part that is the ear, and that will just prove that it's part of the fox, and then I can later black the rest of the leaf out. It was really the only place for the ear to go in this tattoo, but I was lucky that it worked because it broke up the harsh line on his wrist. The previous tattooer who did the piece above it, that wasn't me. I can't remember who he said did that. They left quite a harsh line, and here I am just explaining to him what I'm doing, because obviously I'm tattooing straight over one of his other tattoos, but because I'm able to work it in as sort of a cover-up rework, always just explain to your client what you're doing, rather than just sort of slap it over the top of their old tattoos, and they'll question it for sure. Lucky Cameron's a good mate of mine, so he trusts me. Swapping out needles again. We're going back to the 18 round shader. And we're going to run through the Mississippi mud and black through the tongue. Dipping into the citrus cream. 7.5 volts. I like to sort of work just a tad higher than what I would blending color with a mag with the round shaders. I feel like because they don't have the curve, they sort of need that hit to make sure that all the needles are penetrating and putting ink in rather than sort of bouncing around. So getting a nice bright citrus cream tip on the tongue there. I only did a two color blend in this. It was just the Mississippi mud and just the citrus cream. Just because I didn't want to do it tangerine, just because it would have been too close to the leaves, so it could have just looked like another leaf, but like in the fox's mouth. So sometimes you just got to think about what colors you're using, because if you keep the same color palette, that's good, but keep certain colors to different sort of subject areas and stuff. Because if you use the same colors on something that's two different things, you can get confused between the two, and a tattoo that's confusing to look at is not what you want. What I'm doing here is a dot underneath the fox's mouth. I don't know how true this story is, but one of my friends told me at the tattoo convention when I was getting tattooed that this dot was so that if a spirit was to take over the animal's body, the tattoo's body, then it's going to eat that instead of your soul. I believe that's what he said. So it sort of sounds silly, but I think it's old folklore. Because a lot of European tattooers do it, and my client is very like spiritual and believes in a lot of that kind of stuff. So I actually put it there, and he really like enjoyed that was what it was for. If you've heard this or anything about the dots, or different, let me know. He could have just been taking the piss. I really have no idea. So yeah, let me know if you know about this tradition, and if I'm right or wrong, I guess. So we're going over to the 15 mag. Pretty much all of my cartridges are quadrants. The only ones that aren't pretty much like my biggest mags. I've got easy mags that are 47, 49 or something, but it's very rare that I use one of those. They're actually for blackouts if I've got any clients that want blackouts, so I just have them on hand just in case. And the trad liners that I used before by Just Tat, the rose needle ones. .15 curve mag, cleaned out, straight mango color, which is by Starbright, and taking it nice and slow, making sure that I get it nice and solid, because it is orange and quite a light orange on the hand. I want to get it as solid as I possibly can, because for longevity, really. Light yellows and light oranges are normally the first to go in tattoos when the sun gets to them, and when the skin and your body eventually absorbs the tattoo, and your immune system fights the tattoo off eventually. So being on the hand, a rough area, sees a lot of sun. He's also a tire fitter, so rough hands. Want to get that nice and solid, so super slow circles, making sure I overlap the colors, the edge of the mag where it's penetrating, and just keep it clean. Make sure that you can't see any holidays, any areas that are open skin. wall to wall. Make sure that you get right up to your lines. That's about all you can do with solid color. And you do that, and you should have a solid piece. So we're coming to the end of this video. I've still got to do the white, and then I've got some nice shots of the tattoo that I took once it's all completed. So stick around, but let me know what you think of this video. Was it too long for you? Thank you so much to all the people that did stick around. I really hope that it did help you guys. You know, an hour and 20 minutes is a really long video to watch, but I hope you guys got some value out of it. If you want long form content like this, just let me know. If it's too long and too much information all to take in at once, then let me know and I'll make some shorter form content stuff. Maybe just more tip things, or going more in depth of certain aspects of tattooing, rather than just doing a whole session and just, you know, picking out what I'm doing, sort of thing. So let me know, you know, either way, guys. I'm super stoked that you guys are here, and thank you so much to subscribing to the Patreon. Alright, it's everyone's favourite time. Time for some white. I like to do my white two different ways. One is using a liner, if it's a smaller area, or just like dots, or just like tiny detail bits. The other way I like to do it is a small round shader. Means that I can get a sort of slightly bigger area. Obviously there's not many tattoos where you'd be doing a massive area of white, because it's not going to heal the best, and it can yellow off, so it's sort of best to do just the key parts of you know, white that you really need. one last final good cleanup, and that will mean that the tattoo is done. So thank you guys so much for watching again. This is how the tattoo came out. I'm super stoked with it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and stay creative, guys. I'll see you soon.